Welcome to Messy Math Moments Matter, where we explore experiences to help students engage in math more deeply. When we allow opportunities for math to get a little messy, we will see big results. Don't worry about it being perfect. Math class should be perfectly imperfect, just like this video. So today we are going to be focusing on grade 3, organizing idea for number, learner outcome number 4. Students interpret fractions in relation to one whole. I've gone ahead and I've highlighted the aspects of the various cusps that I will be deliberately focusing on this video. That doesn't mean we won't be focusing on some of the other pieces, but they're not the intention of this particular video. So under understandings, fractions can represent part-to-whole relationships, and a unit fraction describes the size of the equal parts of a fraction. These are the knowledge pieces and the skills and procedures students will know and need to do in order to build this understanding to work towards this particular learner outcome. Let's take a look at the special care and attention section. There is one of the cusps that indicates that fractions are numbers between natural numbers. There's a danger in the phrasing of that because it kind of implies that fractions only exist between natural numbers. They also exist at natural numbers. 8/4 is 2. And if we say that they exist between natural numbers, it might imply that 8/4 would not be a fraction because it doesn't exist between two natural numbers in that same sense. So we just want to make sure that we're careful about how we phrase that so it doesn't imply to students that fractions that convert to whole numbers aren't also fractions. Though you could say that 8/4 exists between 1 and 3. So as long as you talk about that, that would be fine. So why this experience? Students will explore various representations of 1/2 using relational rods and connect these representations to a number line. Students will build an understanding of the relationship between the size of the whole and the size of the half. What materials will you need? Well, you will need relational rods, and your students will need to have prior experience using relational rods, and they'll need 2 handouts. The first handout is just a series of number lines, and the second handout is where is 1/2. Both of these handouts can be found in the linked slideshow, fractions 1/2, and they'll be the last 2 slides. So let's dive into the experience. First thing I do is I have students place the brown rod horizontally, and I'll use my arms to show horizontally along the horizon in front of them. And then I give them a challenge. What I'd like you to do is create a layer above this one, not stacked on top, but above it, so it's sitting on your paper. It must be the same length as this. You must use exactly 2 rods, and those 2 rods must be the exact same color. So I couldn't use a green one and a brown one because I'm using 2 different colors. I couldn't use 3 brown ones because I'm not using exactly 2 rods. So then I'll give students time to go ahead and figure that out. Sometimes students will find it right away. Sometimes they'll take a little bit longer, and that's fine. So eventually students will figure out that if they take 2 pink rods, it will have the exact same length as the brown one. Now, it's really important to remind students that sometimes these rods weren't made perfectly, so they might be a little bit longer, and that's okay, as long as they're just a hair's breadth longer. So you can see I've got a little bit of a space in there, and it doesn't quite match up. That's fine. So then I'll ask students, what is the relationship between one pink rod and the brown rod? So they'll have some time to think, they'll talk to a partner, and when we're done, they'll be able to explain that the pink rod is half the size of the brown rod. And then what I will do is I'll say, the pink rod is one of the 2 equal parts that we need to make the brown rod. The pink one is one of 2 equal parts needed to make the whole. The pink rod is half of the whole. So we'll go ahead and put that back together and we'll put it off to the side. What I'll tell the students now is to choose any other rod other than brown, and they need to repeat that. What they want to find is the 2 rods that will equal the length of the rod that they chose. So students will go ahead and they might try the yellow rod, and they might put purple rod together, and oh no, the purple rod doesn't work. So they'll just go through and find one that matches. And it doesn't matter which one they start with. So they might figure out 2 reds is equivalent in length to the yellow rod. So if I'm watching and they aren't moving on, I'll just say, okay, can you find another rod that works? Most students will automatically look for another rod. So then they'll find the purple rods are equivalent to the black rod. 2 dark green rods are equivalent to the blue rod. And 2 blue rods are equivalent to the purple rod. And then I'll come along and I'll ask, are you sure you found them all? And then I'll walk away. Sometimes they'll say yes right away. Well, how do you know you found them all? And usually they'll say, I tested every single rod and this is all that I could find. And I'll have them share all of the rods and I'll build this all on the board for them. And then I'll say, okay, so we looked at the relationship of 1 pink rod to the brown rod. And you told me that was a half. So let's look at 1 part to the whole for each of these. 1 green part to the whole blue, 1 blue part to the whole purple, 1 red part to the whole yellow, and 1 purple part to the whole black. And I'll have them restructure this so that theirs looks like this as well. And I'll ask them, what's the relationship for this one, and this one, this one, and this one? And they will tell me it's half, 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 and half. So the question becomes, well, if this is half, how can these all be half as well? Because the pink one is half the size of the whole. The green one is half the size of the blue. They're just reiterating that conversation that they've already had. But I want it to be really solid in their brain that that is the relationship between the pink and the brown. You can have a half look differently depending on the size of the whole. And that might come out in the conversation. Well, my whole is bigger, so then my half is bigger. My whole is smaller, so my half is smaller. So what I'll do now is give students the first handout. And I will have them take the brown rod and place it on their first number line. And I tell them to make sure to line it up to this first line. This line is their start line, so I need to make sure it's lined up perfectly to that. And then this line is going to be the top of their brown rod. So I really need to make sure that they've lined this up carefully, because sometimes what will happen is students will leave it a little bit off, and then your lineups for halves and wholes and later on quarters and thirds won't match up properly. So I will go around and I'll double check that every student has lined it up perfectly along this line and along the top line. So then I will tell students to trace this edge here. So this is my start, here is my end. And I will carefully draw this line here, and then I'll have them draw it up, extend it up, nice and neat. So students will go around and draw that. I'll go and check that they're doing that properly. So when we're done, we'll come back here and I will say, well, this was your start. So our start will be labeled as 0. So I'll go and check that they've labeled all of that as 0. And from here all the way to here, that's my whole. That's my 1 whole. So I will label this as 1. And we'll talk about making sure to leave some space here so it doesn't look like that's one long line there. So I can tell that I'm writing the number 1. So from here to here, that's the length of my whole. That's the length of 1. I stress that quite often with students. Then we'll take our half, and again, we'll place it so that it is touching the top. So make sure my brown hole is below the line. My half is above the line. Make sure it is lined up neatly here, and I'll go around and I'll check every student again. And then I'll say, here's the start of my half, here's the end of my half. Oh, this is going to be a little tricky for me, so I'm just going to move this out of the way for now. I will trace this nice and neat. I'll move this and I'll extend this line down. From here to here is 1/2, so I will neatly draw that as 1/2, again leaving some space. From here to here, that's 1 whole. So when we're done tracing that, I really want to make sure students understand that this is what the distance from 0. So again, from here to here is 1 whole. From here to here is 1/2, but then I'll add this in. What's here to here? And students will tell me, well, that's 1/2. So then from here to here is 1 whole, from here to here is 1/2, from here to here is another 1/2. So that they understand that this distance is 1/2, this distance is 1/2, this distance from here is a whole. And that we mark these numbers are references from the distance from 0, that's the value. So after that, I just ask students to go ahead and choose any of their other representations and go ahead and trace them. So they will trace this one as 1. They'll trace this one as 1/2. And sometimes I have to come and remind them, what's this? This is your start. Go ahead and label that. And they'll just go ahead and trace the next one. All right, and you will notice that there is an extra line down here, because sometimes what I found students do is that they'll actually create a different whole. So they might actually create 12 so that they can then go ahead and show 1/2 like that. So I wanted to give them an extra spot in order to do that. After this, what I will do with students is try to get them to understand where 1/2 is without having the rods there to build it for them. So I might say, I'll just flip this one over. Imagine that this is my desk. If this is my start and here's my hole, where would 1/2 be? So I want them to learn to approximate where 1/2 would be. So they would actually be doing this on their desk. And I could use the student's desk to demonstrate this. This is my hole, here's my 1/2. I might walk up to a wall and stand here and say, here's my start. I'll walk all the way to the end, here's my hole. And then I'll go back to the start and say, okay, stop me when I'm about halfway. And I can do that with as many different things as I want to. Really big things, really small things, it's all good. So after we're done that, and I'm confident students are able to estimate where 1/2 is. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be about. Then I can go ahead and give them the next handout. So this one says, where is 1/2? Draw a line and label it on the number line. So students might take their relational rods and see if they can figure out what this matches up to. Well, it'll be kind of close. Well, this one actually works out. And they'll be able to find one to draw it. And then they might come along and they might say, oh, let's see if this one has a perfect match. Well, that one actually works out. So they'll be able to use some of their relational rods in order to make these work. Now that'll only work if you don't change the scaling of the page. So double check. If you have a student who's struggling, you might want to say, why don't you try building the number 1, build your hole with relational rods. And other students, you might not indicate that. But our goal is to get students to approximate. So what you might want to do is say, okay, I want you to draw a line to approximate. So they might say, okay, well, it'd be about here. Now go ahead and build your whole, and then go ahead and find your half and see how close you are. And we can do that. Ooh, look at that. I was pretty close. So you can use that as an opportunity to check as well. When they're done these 4, they'll come down here and they'll draw their own hole. So they might draw their line here, they might draw their line here. It really doesn't matter. It's just an opportunity for them to pick a different hole and then show them their half. And the last spot, ask them to explain how they decided where to draw one half. So building on that communication piece. And you can say, I need you to explain it to somebody who wasn't here, so that you can help them understand how to find half when they know what the whole is. And that's it. That's the first experience with students in order to explore finding one half as it relates to the whole, and engaging in that idea that the bigger the whole, the bigger the half, and the smaller the whole, the smaller the half. Hopefully you found that helpful. If you have any ideas for future Messy Math Moments Matter videos, I would love to hear them, and I hope to see you in the next one.